The shuttle doors opened and took her first breath of recycled alien air. It smelled like nothing. No dirt, no rain, no life. Just clean, filtered emptiness. She adjusted the bag on her shoulder and stepped onto the polished floors of Academy. The school floated above a garden world called Four. Through the massive windows, she could see clouds that never stormed and oceans that never raged. Everything here was controlled, perfect, safe. Was none of those things. She was 17 years old, brown-skinned, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her body was lean and strong from years of climbing, swimming, and running through the wilderness parks near her home in Chile. Her father was a Marine. Her mother was a diplomat. Together, they had raised her to be ready for anything. Now her mother had become Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Concordance, and had become the first human student at the most elite school in known space. Lucky her. A tall alien approached her. He had pale blue skin and 4 arms, and he moved like water flowing uphill. His name was Administrator, and he smiled with a mouth that had too many teeth. "Welcome, miss," he said. "We are honored to have humanity's representative among us. I trust you will find our academy educational." There was something in his voice, not quite mockery, more like the tone someone used when talking to a child who didn't know any better, had heard that tone before. She smiled politely and said nothing. Led her through corridors of white stone and soft light. Students passed them in groups, and every single one stopped to stare, saw species she had only read about, though with their silver skin and large dark eyes, they who floated instead of walked, they whose bodies were partially transparent, all of them beautiful, all of them delicate, all of them looking at her like she was a bug that had crawled into their garden. She heard whispers as she passed. "Is that the human? From the death world? I heard their planet has creatures that eat them. I heard they eat those creatures back." Kept walking. She had expected this. Earth had only made contact with the Concordance 3 years ago, and humanity had not made a good first impression. When the alien diplomats had learned about Earth's history of wars, diseases, predators, and natural disasters, they had been horrified. They called Earth a death world, and they called humans. It was not a compliment. Her room was small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window looking out at the peaceful sky. She unpacked her few belongings and found the small case her father had pressed into her hands before she left. "Just in case," he had said with a wink. She opened it now. Inside was a compact survival kit, a flashlight, a multi-tool water purification tablets, a first aid kit, and a small book on wilderness survival. She had laughed when he gave it to her. What could possibly go wrong on a space station run by the most advanced species in the galaxy? She wasn't laughing now. Something about this place made her uneasy. It was too clean, too quiet, too safe. Her instincts, the ones her ancestors had developed over millions of years of surviving on Earth, were whispering that something was wrong. The next morning, attended her first class. The room was filled with students from a dozen different species, and they all turned to look when she entered. She found an empty seat near the back and sat down. The teacher was a named professor. She had the same silver skin and dark eyes as the other, and she moved with a grace that made feel like a clumsy animal, which was probably the point. "Class," Professor announced, "we have a new student from Earth." She said the word Earth the way someone might say garbage dump. "Perhaps," the professor continued, "would like to tell us about her home world." It was not really a question. Stood up slowly, aware of every eye in the room. "What would you like to know?" she asked. A voice came from the front of the room. "I would like to know how your species survived at all." Looked at the speaker. She was like the professor, but younger and more beautiful. Her silver skin seemed to glow, and her dark eyes held a cruel amusement. She wore clothes that probably cost more than this entire house back on Earth. "I am Aura," the girl said. "My family has traded with 1,000 worlds. We have seen many primitive species, but I have never seen one from a world as hostile as yours." She touched a panel on her desk, and suddenly the air was filled with images. Volcanoes erupting, hurricanes spinning, sharks with rows of teeth, spiders, snakes, diseases that made flesh rot and blood boil. "This is Earth," said to the class. "A world where the ground shakes and swallows cities, where the sky catches fire, where the water is filled with monsters and the land is covered with poison. And yet somehow, humans not only survived but built a civilization." She turned to with a smile that held no warmth. "Tell me, how did you do it? How did you crawl out of that nightmare and learn to walk upright?" The class laughed. It was a soft, polite sound, but it cut deep. Looked at the images floating in the air. Her home, her world, her people's history reduced to a horror show for aliens who had never known real danger. She could have been angry. She could have shouted or cried or stormed out. Instead, she smiled. "We did it," she said quietly, "by being too stubborn to die." The laughter stopped. Something flickered in his eyes, not fear exactly, but uncertainty. Sat back down. She had learned something important today. These people, these perfect beings from their perfect worlds, had never faced real hardship. They had evolved on planets where the weather was gentle and the predators were few. They had built their civilization in comfort and safety. They had no idea what humans were capable of. That night lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. She could hear her father's voice in her head, teaching her to track animals in the forest. She could feel her grandmother's hands, showing her how to find water in the desert. She carried 100 generations of survivors in her blood. These aliens thought she came from a nightmare world. They were right, but they had forgotten something important. Nightmares made monsters, and monsters learned to survive. Closed her eyes and smiled in the darkness. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The days that followed were difficult. Aura had made her personal project, and she was creative in her cruelty. In science class, arranged for to be questioned about human technology, the professor, a thin being with 6 eyes, asked her to explain how humans had developed space travel. "It must have taken your species many thousands of years," the professor said, "given your limitations." "Thought about it. About 70 years," she said. The room went silent. 70 years, the professor repeated. "From what starting point?" "From our first powered flight, a wooden machine with fabric wings. We went from that to landing on our moon in 66 years, then to the outer planets, then to other stars." The professor's 6 eyes blinked one at a time. "That is not possible. That took 4,000 years to achieve the same progress. That took 6,000. Shrugged, "We were in a hurry. We kept having wars. Wars make you invent things faster." She saw the looks on their faces. Horror mixed with something else. Something like fear. These species had never known war. The very concept was alien to them. They could not understand a people who had turned violence into progress. His expression was darker than usual that day. The physical education classes were almost funny. The Academy's idea of exercise was gentle floating in zero gravity, or slow movements that looked like meditation. When the instructor asked the students to demonstrate their physical abilities, most of them could barely lift their own body weight. Then it was turn. "What physical activities do humans perform?" the instructor asked. His transparent body filled with flowing colors that showed his emotions. Right now, he was a calm blue. "We run," said. "We swim, we climb, we fight." "Show us running," the instructor said. Started jogging around the exercise area. It was not even fast by human standards, just a comfortable pace that she could maintain for hours. Back home, she ran 5 miles every morning before breakfast. After 10 minutes, the instructor's colors had turned to alarmed orange. After 20 minutes, he stopped her. "Your heart rate," he said, his voice shaking. "Your breathing, Your body is under extreme stress. You must stop before you damage yourself. Was barely sweating. I'm fine, she said. This is normal. Normal? The instructor looked like he might faint. You have been moving at high speed for 20 minutes without rest. No species can do this. Humans can, said. We evolved as persistent hunters. We would chase our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, sometimes for days. The other students stared at her. She saw it in their eyes now, not just disgust or mockery, real fear. They were looking at her like she was a monster pretending to be civilized. Only one student did not seem afraid. He was huge, nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin like stone and small eyes that held a surprising gentleness. His name was, and he came from a heavy-gravity world called. His people were looked down upon as laborers, too big and clumsy for polite society. After class, he approached her. His voice was deep and slow, like rocks grinding together. You should be careful, he said, is planning something. Looked up at him, way up. What kind of something? The Founders' Gala is in 2 weeks. All the important families will attend. Ambassadors, diplomats, your parents will be there. And Stone Face somehow managed to look worried. Has arranged a special performance, a traditional dance. She has made sure you will be forced to participate. Did not understand, so I will learn the dance. You cannot learn it. It requires telepathy. The dancers share thoughts to move together. Without telepathy, you will stumble, you will fall, in front of everyone, in front of your parents. Now understood, public humiliation on the biggest stage possible. It was clever and cruel. Thank you for warning me, she said. Nodded slowly. You are not like the others. You do not look at me like I am furniture. He paused. Be careful, small human does not like to lose. That night explored the station. She had always been curious, always needed to know the shape of the space around her. It was an instinct from Earth, where knowing your environment could save your life. She found the maintenance corridors, the emergency systems, the power core deep in the station's belly, and she noticed something strange. The emergency systems were almost decorative. The backup power looked like it had never been tested. The fire suppression was minimal. The emergency lighting was pretty but weak. These people had never needed to prepare for disaster. They had lived in safety for so long that they had forgotten what danger looked like. Made mental notes of everything. The paths, the doors, the hiding spots. She did not know why. It was just something her body told her to do. Be ready, be prepared, remember the way out. On her way back to her room, she passed a window and stopped. Outside, the garden world of 4 turned slowly in the starlight. So peaceful, so beautiful, so completely unprepared for anything to go wrong. A memory came to her. Her grandmother, telling stories of the earthquake that had destroyed their village when she was young. How everything had changed in seconds. How the people who survived were not the strongest but the ones who could adapt. The ones who could function when everything fell apart. The world is not your friend, her grandmother had said. It will shake you and burn you and try to swallow you whole. The only thing you can do is be ready. Always be ready. Touched the window, feeling the cold glass against her fingers. These aliens thought they were superior. They thought their technology and their telepathy and their peaceful worlds made them better than humans. But they had never been tested. They had never faced the darkness. And darkness always came eventually. Smiled at her reflection in the glass. 2 weeks until the gala. 2 weeks until's trap. She did not know how she would escape it yet, but she had survived worse than a dance. She had survived Earth. The Founders' Gala was the most beautiful thing had ever seen. The great hall of Academy had been transformed into a garden of light. Floating crystals cast rainbows across the walls. Musicians played instruments that made sounds like liquid silver. Thousands of guests filled the space, wearing clothes that shimmered and flowed like living things. Wore a simple black dress. Her mother had offered to buy her something more elaborate but had refused. She did not belong here, and she saw no point in pretending otherwise. Her parents stood near the entrance, greeting diplomats and making polite conversation. Her mother looked elegant and confident. Her father looked uncomfortable in his formal clothes, but his eyes were sharp, always watching, always ready. He had not stopped being a Marine just because he married a diplomat. "You look beautiful," her mother said, kissing her cheek. "You look ready to run," her father said quietly and winked. He knew her too well. She had positioned herself near the exits without even thinking about it. Old habits from a young lifetime of expecting trouble. The evening passed slowly. Ate strange foods that tasted like nothing and drank beverages that sparkled like stars. She watched the aliens dance and talk and laugh, and she felt like a wolf at a party for sheep. Then Aura took the stage. She was stunning, of course. Her silver skin had been painted with patterns of gold, and her dark eyes shone with triumph. She raised her hands and the crowd fell silent. "Friends," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "tonight we celebrate the founding of our great academy, a place where the finest young minds of the Concordance come together in peace and harmony." The crowd applauded, felt her stomach tighten. "This year we have a special guest, a representative of a new species, a species that comes from a world of violence and chaos, a species that knows nothing of our ways." Saw her mother's smile freeze. Her father's hand moved slightly toward his belt, where no weapon hung. "I think," continued, "that we should welcome her properly, with a demonstration of true culture, the dance of stellar harmony." Spotlights swept across the room and found. She was blinded for a moment, and when she could see again, two servants were beside her, gently but firmly taking her arms. "Please," one of them said, "you must come to the stage." Considered fighting. She could break free easily, but that would cause a scene, embarrass her parents, damage humanity's reputation. Had planned this perfectly. She allowed herself to be led to the stage. The dance floor was a circle of polished crystal, surrounded by the watching crowd. 12 dancers stood in formation, their silver bodies perfect and still, stood at the center, smiling. "The dance of stellar harmony requires all participants to share one mind," she announced. "We move as one being, guided by telepathy. It is the highest expression of culture." She turned to, "I am sure our human friend will do her best." The music began. It was not really sound. It was a telepathic pulse, a rhythm that could feel pressing against her mind but could not understand. The dancers began to move, flowing like water, their bodies perfectly synchronized. Tried to follow. She watched their movements and them a half-second too late. She stepped when they turned. She reached when they fell. She was awkward, clumsy, wrong. The crowd began to laugh, soft at first, then louder. Smile grew wider. Felt heat rise to her face. Not shame, anger. These creatures thought they were better than her because they could share thoughts. They mocked her because she was different. They had no idea what her difference really meant. She stumbled again, nearly falling. The laughter grew. Her parents watched helplessly from the crowd. She could see her father's hands clenched into fists. And then the lights went out. Not dimmed, not flickered. Out. Complete and total darkness, blacker than anything had ever experienced. The music stopped. The crystals stopped floating and crashed to the ground. The air itself seemed to stop moving. For one perfect moment, there was absolute silence. Then the screaming began. They were the first to panic. Their telepathy required light to function, and without it, they were suddenly alone in their own heads for the first time in their lives. They screamed and clutched at each other, their perfect grace forgotten. The other species followed. Beings who had never known darkness, never felt true fear, suddenly found themselves blind and helpless. They ran in all directions, crashing into each other, trampling the fallen. Tables overturned. Glass shattered. Someone was crying. Someone was calling for help. Someone was praying to gods they had forgotten. stood perfectly still. The darkness did not scare her. She had camped in forests where no light reached. She had explored caves deep beneath the mountains. She had survived power outages that lasted for weeks after storms. Darkness was not her enemy. It was her oldest friend. Her eyes began to adjust. It took less than a minute. Humans had evolved to function in low light, to hunt at dawn and dusk, to survive the long nights of their death world. She could see shapes now, moving bodies, fallen figures, the exit doors, and in the chaos she could hear something else, the whimper of someone in pain, the cry of someone trapped. Took a breath, then another. Her heart rate slowed, her mind cleared, her ancestors whispered in her blood, telling her what to do. She had spent 2 weeks as a victim, as a joke, as the primitive human who could not keep up with her betters. That was over now. Now it was time to show them what a death world really made. His voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Everyone stopped moving, now. It was not a request. It was a command. The voice of a species that had evolved to lead, to fight, to survive. A voice designed to carry across battlefields and through storms. A voice that triggered something ancient and primal in every creature that heard it. The panic paused. Not stopped, but paused. Creatures froze in place, their instincts responding to an authority they did not understand. "If you move, you will hurt yourself and others," continued, her voice calm but loud. "Stay where you are. Help is coming." She did not wait to see if they listened. She was already moving. Her eyes had adjusted enough to see the basic shapes of the room. The fallen tables, the broken glass, the bodies on the ground. Some were moving, some were not. She found first. The big stone-skinned alien was standing near a wall, his small eyes wide with confusion. Unlike the others, he was not panicking. His people came from a harsh world too, not as harsh as Earth, but harsh enough to teach them patience in crisis. She said, grabbing his massive arm, "I need your help." "I cannot see," he rumbled. "I can, follow my voice. We need to help the injured." Together they moved through the hall, guided them with her voice, and used his incredible strength to lift fallen debris and clear paths. They found a with a broken limb, crying softly in the dark. They found a who had fallen and could not float back up. They found dozens of small injuries and a few serious ones. His hands moved automatically. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize the break. Keep them calm. First aid was something every human child learned because on Earth, you never knew when the world would try to kill you or someone you loved. Time passed. Minutes or hours, she could not tell. The emergency lights had still not come on. The environmental systems were making strange sounds. The temperature was changing, getting colder in some areas and hotter in others. Something was very wrong. She found her father near the main entrance. He had organized a group of human diplomats and their security teams, and they were doing what humans did best, adapting. "Power core is dead," he told her quietly. "Emergency backup should have kicked in immediately. It did not. Someone sabotaged it." "I saw the engineering section when I explored the station," said. "I can find it in the dark." Her father looked at her for a long moment. He had taught her to track animals in the forest, to find her way by the stars, to survive when everything went wrong. He knew what she was capable of. "Go," he said. "Be careful, be smart, be human." She kissed his cheek and disappeared into the darkness. The maintenance corridors were worse than the main hall. No windows, no emergency lights, complete and absolute blackness. Pulled out her father's flashlight and turned it on. The small beam of light was the only brightness in a world of shadow. She moved quickly but carefully. Her feet remembered the path she had walked 2 weeks ago, left at the junction, down the ladder, through the narrow passage where the pipes ran overhead. Her body squeezed through spaces that would have triggered panic in creatures who had never known tight places. She heard sounds behind her once, footsteps. Then they stopped. Whatever had followed her had given up. The darkness was too much. Not for her, never for her. The engineering section was cold. The power core sat in the center of the room, a massive cylinder of alien technology that hummed with residual energy. Around it, panels had been ripped open and wires had been cut. The sabotage was obvious and brutal. Studied the damage with her flashlight. She was not an engineer. She did not understand half of what she was looking at, but she understood systems. She understood cause and effect. She understood that if you broke something, there was usually a way to make it work again. Not perfectly, not elegantly, just enough. She pulled out her multi-tool and got to work. The next hour was the hardest of her life. She stripped wires with her teeth. She connected things that should not be connected. She hit panels until they sparked and kicked machines until they groaned. It was not engineering. It was violence against technology. It was human stubbornness refusing to accept defeat. And slowly, impossibly, it worked. The power core coughed, sputtered, died, then coughed again. "Come on," whispered. "Come on, you stupid machine, work." She hit it one more time. The lights came on. Not full power, just emergency lighting, just climate control, just enough to keep everyone alive. But it was enough. Through the speakers, she heard the distant sound of cheering. Leaned against the power core, exhausted. Her hands were cut and burned. Her dress was ruined. She was covered in grease and dirt and blood. She had never felt better in her life. The walk back to the main hall was easier with the lights on. She passed security teams rushing toward engineering. She passed medical staff heading to help the injured. She passed aliens who stopped and stared at her with eyes that no longer held mockery. When she reached the great hall, the crowd parted for her. She saw her parents. Her mother was crying. Her father was smiling with fierce pride. She saw Aura, standing alone, her golden paint smeared and her perfect composure shattered. She saw who nodded slowly, his stone face somehow managing to look impressed. And she saw Administrator, who approached her with an expression she did not recognize at first. It took her a moment to understand. It was respect. "Miss," he said, "it seems we owe you a great debt." Looked at him, then at the crowd, then at the damage around her, the evidence of a species that had forgotten what danger meant. "You owe me nothing," she said. "I just did what humans do." She walked past him, toward her parents, toward home. Behind her, she heard the whispers begin again, but they were different now. "She saved us." In the dark, alone. What are humans? The question hung in the air, unanswered, smiled to herself. They were about to find out. The investigation took 3 days. Security teams examined the sabotaged systems. Diplomats argued about blame. News spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. But the real story was not about sabotage. It was about what happened after. The saboteurs were caught quickly. A rival political faction had wanted to embarrass the Concordance leadership, to show that even their greatest academy was vulnerable. They had planned the attack for months, choosing the gala because it would cause maximum chaos and maximum shame. They had not planned for. The security footage from the engineering section was limited, but what existed was enough. It showed a small human figure, barely visible in the darkness, working for over an hour to restart systems that should have been impossible to fix. It showed her hands bleeding. It showed her talking to herself, encouraging the machine, threatening it, making deals with it like it was a living thing that could be convinced. It showed her refusing to give up. "Fascinating," said the Concordance Science Council in their official report. The human displayed physical endurance far beyond expected parameters. She functioned in complete darkness. She maintained cognitive ability under extreme stress. She improvised repairs using methods that should not have worked but did. They were trying to be scientific about it, clinical, but everyone who watched the footage saw something else. They saw a predator in its natural environment. At Academy, everything changed. Aura tried to pretend nothing had happened. She walked through the halls with her head high, surrounded by her usual followers. But the followers were fewer now, and they did not laugh when she spoke. They remembered the sound of her screaming in the dark, helpless and terrified while a human saved their lives. 1 week after the gala, she approached in the corridor. "You think you are special now," said. Her voice was cold, but something in her eyes looked broken. "You think one night of playing hero changes what you are. You are still from a death world. You are still primitive." Looked at her calmly. She had stopped being afraid of a long time ago. Maybe she had never been afraid at all. "You are right," she said. "I am from a death world. My grandmother walked through a war zone to find safety. My grandfather crossed a desert with no water for 3 days. My mother grew up during earthquakes that killed thousands. My father fought in battles that would make your nightmares look peaceful." She stepped closer, stepped back. "You prepared me to dance," continued. "My world prepared me for everything else. And when your perfect systems failed and your perfect people panicked, I did not need telepathy or technology or perfection. I just needed to be what Earth made me." "What is that?" whispered. Smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was almost sad. "A survivor." She walked away. Behind her she heard breathing hard, trying to regain her composure. But everyone in the corridor had heard. Everyone had seen. The balance of power had shifted. In the weeks that followed, noticed changes. Students who had mocked her now nodded with respect. Teachers who had dismissed her now asked for her opinion. The academy started adding emergency training to their classes. Not much, just the basics. How to function when systems fail. How to stay calm in crisis. How to be a little bit more human. Became her closest friend. The big stone-skinned alien sat with her at meals and walked with her between classes. Other students joined them. The outcasts. The ones who had never fit into the perfect concordant society. They did not talk about the gala much. They did not need to. They had all learned the same lesson. Civilization was fragile. Technology could fail. The darkness always waited. And when it came, the survivors were not the most beautiful or the most powerful or the most advanced. The survivors were the ones who had learned to keep going when everything fell apart. One night, sat in the academy garden with her new friends. The artificial stars shone overhead, perfect and controlled. Somewhere below them, the engineering section still bore the marks of her desperate repairs. The technicians had wanted to fix them properly, but administrator had ordered them to leave the repairs visible. "A reminder," he had said, "of what we learned that night." Looked up at the fake sky and thought about Earth, about its storms and earthquakes and predators, about its diseases and disasters and wars, about the millions of years her ancestors had spent fighting just to exist. They had called her planet a nightmare. They had called her people barbaric. But when the nightmare came for them, she had been the one to fight it back. "What are you thinking?" asked. Smiled. "I am thinking about darkness, about how they fear it." "Do you fear it?" She shook her head. "Darkness is just the absence of light. It is not evil. It is not dangerous. It is just a test, and my people have been passing that test for a very long time." She stood up and stretched. Tomorrow there would be more classes, more challenges, more opportunities to show these perfect aliens what humans really were. Not monsters, not barbarians, not primitives. Just survivors, tough as stone and stubborn as hell, forged in the fires of a world that never stopped trying to kill them. And ready for anything. The story of the gala spread across the galaxy. It changed how other species saw humanity, not immediately, not completely, but slowly the word stopped being an insult. It became a compliment. And somewhere on Earth, an old grandmother heard the story and smiled. She had always known her granddaughter was special, not because she was smarter or stronger or better than other people, but because she was human, and humans did not break. They bent, they adapted, they survived. And when the lights went out, they were the ones who turned them back on.